And joining me now once again from Canberra, Malcolm Davis. He's a senior analyst in defence strategy and capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. It's always good to get you on, sir. The pounding of civilian areas continues, but as we were just discussing there in Jim's story and earlier, it would appear the actual advance of Russian troops in terms of achieving objectives like encircling Kyiv is still slow. What is your read of progress or otherwise?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I think that the Russians are still making very slow progress. It's a real slog for the Russians. I think in part this is due to the lack of logistic support to sustain high-intensity operations. You've noticed, for example, the number of surface-to-surface missiles that are being fired has decreased remarkably over the last few days because they can't maintain that rate of fire or they'll run out of missiles. The same goes with the sorts of artillery barrages. Now, as the Russian forces maneuver around Kyiv and Kharkiv, with the intent in particular in Kyiv of taking the city centre in the next 3 days, I think that the Russians are struggling to sustain operational and tactical momentum, and this is really becoming quite apparent in terms of how the Russian government is responding, including bringing in foreign fighters into the battlefield.
Yeah, then the missile point you made is a good one. 630-something fired total, but I think 300 were fired in the first few days, so it's really slowed down. It is smart, isn't it, for a smaller underdog army like the Ukrainians to avoid, big frontal battles in favour of ambushes and attacks on supply lines. Is that what you're seeing with the Ukrainians in this war, being nimble, moving quickly, strike and leave?
Exactly. I think if the Ukrainians tried to confront the Russians in a head-on battle, they would lose, and they would lose badly, because the Russians still have weight of numbers and quantity has a quality all of its own. So really the key to victory for the Ukrainians is to hit the Russian supply lines and slow them down that way. And they seem to be achieving success in that regard. That 60-kilometre long column north of Kyiv, for example, it's sitting stationary because it's run out of fuel, essentially, which leaves it wide open to stinging attacks by ambushing Ukrainian units. And that's sapping the morale of the Russian forces in that column. So, these are the sorts of tactics they are using very effectively.
Yeah, taking out individual tanks. They took out an artillery position the other day. The West has certainly shocked Russia. I think we can agree with both, its unity and the strength of the sanctions. Even stronger sanctions are coming in all the time. I'm curious your thought on how delicate the risk balance is. Is there a tipping point when the strength of punishment combined with a lack of battlefield progress becomes an existential threat to Putin and could cause him to lash out even more?
I think that is a real danger, and it's likely to be a danger that grows in the next few days, potentially into the next couple of weeks, as we ramp up the intensity and the effectiveness of sanctions. In particular, we stop buying Russian oil, for example. That's going to start placing real pressure not only on Putin, but also the people around him, the oligarchs. And so it's more likely that he'll become more isolated, more paranoid, and like a cornered animal, he's likely to lash out. And I do fear that that's where you could see significant escalation. There's already been talk, for example, that the Russians are trying to create a false flag operation involving chemical and biological weapons. That would give Putin then a justification to move to tactical nuclear weapons.
Yeah, that is worrying, and the Russians are already putting that false flag out there. You touched on something that I think is really interesting. For Mr. Putin, losing this war could take many forms. I mean, he could win the battlefield with sheer numbers, but lose the overall war in terms of his aims. I was interviewing an analyst yesterday who said that one lesson of history is that autocratic rulers cannot lose wars and remain autocrats. How much damage could Putin be doing to his own political survivability?
I think he's very conscious of that. His primary motivation in all of this is his own personal power and his grip on power. And I think if he is seen to lose this war, then that group will be severely weakened. So I do think that the risk is of groups around him moving against him in a coup d'etat. At the same time, you've got growing popular unrest that could generate the possibility of a colour revolution in the streets of Moscow. So I do think that there's a real risk that, as I said, he's a cornered animal. Could he lash out? Could he escalate, including potentially to the use of nuclear weapons? That's what's on the back of everyone's mind at the moment.
Yeah. Always terrific analysis. Malcolm Davis, good to see you. We'll have you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you.